When we think of grief and loss, we only think of the death of a
Mhm.
loved one, but there are so many losses, and it's not inclusive to this list, but
Right.
you the people that I deal with or the clients that I work with, they may have lost a loved one through death, but there may
Mhm.
be a divorce or a breakup of a
Mm.
relationship. There's also parental alienation. So let's say one parent is pitting the children against the other
Mm.
one. That is a
Wow.
huge loss. That's a massive grief.
Join us at the inaugural Ascend Summit, where empowerment and healing become part of your new reality. Presented by You Are Not Your Trauma podcast, this summit is your gateway to growth, connection, and discovering your true potential. And it's all happening June 28th and 29th in Dallas, Texas. Don't miss your chance to be a part of something life-changing. Early bird tickets are on sale now. Secure your spot today by going to ascend.youarenotyourtrauma.com.
Welcome to the You Are Not Your Trauma podcast, a show that reminds you that you are not alone, your experiences matter, and you are not defined by what you've been through. Each week, you will hear from the host and invited guests who have either personal or professional experience with trauma. They will share their stories and strategies for overcoming past wounds and beginning the journey toward healing and wholeness. Now, here's your host, a gifted speaker, author, coach, and entrepreneur, Harriet M. Harris.
Hello, and welcome to a brand new episode of You Are Not Your Trauma, the podcast that brings hope, healing, and inspiration to those who have experienced life's most challenging moments. It's here in this space that we peel back the layers of trauma, not just to expose it, but to understand and overcome it. I'm your host, Harriet M. Harris, and I am so glad that you're here today. I hope that this show is an important part of your healing journey. Now, today we're discussing a delicate yet universally relatable topic. After the storm, the silent aftermath of loss. Now, in life, each of us experience loss in many forms, some visible and some invisible to the world around us. Now, today we'll explore the many faces of loss, the silent grief that follows, and how we can navigate through to find light once again. But before we get into our conversation, I want to set the stage for what's to come. We'll talk about the spectrum of loss, not just the ones marked by farewells, but also those transitions that redefine who we are, from career changes to the loss of identity and the fading of dreams. We'll acknowledge the silent grief, often overlooked, and discuss how to navigate the quiet that follows the storm of loss, sharing stories and strategies for healing and finding new purpose. And who better to guide us through this journey than our incredible guest, Lisa Heacock, an international certified and accredited life coach, grief coach, certified grief educator, inspirational speaker, podcast host of the Because We Love Finding Meaning After Loss podcast, an international best-selling author and breast cancer survivor who's turned her profound personal losses into a life of purpose and passion. And now she helps others do the very same. Lisa, welcome to the show. I'm truly honored to have you with us today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Wonderful. Now, Lisa, can you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and what you do, the work that you do?
Yes, well, it all started in 2018 to 2019. I lost 12 loved ones through death. So, in a
Mhm.
22-month period. And that changed the trajectory of my life. And I went through so much healing in different modalities. And so that's why then ultimately I decided to become a life coach and grief
Mm,
educator.
wow. And you said that was 20, how many?
It was 12 loved ones in 22 months.
12.
So
12. Okay, I'm sorry. I wrote that down wrong. 12 loved ones in 22 months. Wow. And that, I can't imagine how difficult that had to have been.
yeah, I grew up really only losing like a grandparent and an
Hmm.
aunt, but I was young.
Yeah.
Um, I had never really had significant loss
Hmm.
until then, and then it
Wow.
was just compound grief, just one right after
Mm,
another.
wow. Well, I am so glad that you are now at a place where you're able to help other people deal with such loss. So, thank you for the courage to come on and share this with us. Now, we are going to, before we dive into everything that you're going to share with us, we're going to take a very quick commercial break. So, stay with us, everyone. We'll be right back to peel back the layers of the silent aftermath of loss. We'll be right back.
Imagine having resources at your fingertips that support you through every step of your healing journey. That's exactly what you'll get with the You Are Not Your Trauma app. Access guided meditations that find your peace, read inspiring stories that resonate with your experiences, and join a community that truly understands. But that's not all. Dive into the Healing Chronicles and participate in community challenges. It's more than an app. It's a companion on your journey of self-discovery and healing. Download the You Are Not Your Trauma app today and join a community where your story matters and your healing journey is honored. Find us on the App Store and Google Play Store. Your journey to healing starts now.
Well, welcome back, everyone. Now, we're here with Lisa. We are ready to explore the depths of loss and the journey to healing. Now, Lisa, could you begin by expanding on the different types of loss that people might experience beyond the death of a loved one, such as the end of relationships, loss of identity, or career changes?
Yes. I mean, I think that's one of the things that's really important, that when we think of grief and loss, we only think of the death of a
Mhm.
loved one, but there are so many losses, and it's not inclusive to this list, but
Right.
you the people that I deal with or the clients that I work with, they may have lost a loved one through death, but there may
Mhm.
be a divorce or a breakup of a
Mm.
relationship. There's also parental alienation. So let's say one parent is pitting the children against the other
Mm.
one. That is a
Wow.
huge loss. That's a massive grief. There's like you said, the loss of identity, the loss of a career, but even
Right.
moving to a different state, to a different country. Yeah, I
Recently, I
moved
just
from
did that.
it's so difficult because you lose a community. There's people who've lost
Yes.
their religion or their faith. They've
Mm.
also then lost the community. Um, Pet loss is another big
Mm.
one. So there are, again, what I say is anything that causes that pain and that loss, there is grief.
Mm. Okay. Wow. Anything that causes that pain and loss. And, it took me a while personally to realize that I was grieving my move. I was very connected to my church before we moved recently, about 7 months ago now, from Tennessee to Texas. And I just loved it. And when I found out I was moving to Texas, I was like, I don't want to really do that, and it took me a while. So, um, when I saw that this is what you worked with, I was like, this would be a perfect opportunity to really hone in on the fact that grief is bigger than just death. I mean, I know death is a very hard one to deal with, but I think a lot of times we go through life with changes that we aren't able to cope with because we don't look at them for as what they are.
100%. And I think that there are times when it can go quite a long time. And then the light bulb moment of, oh my God, like I was actually grieving. That is
Yeah.
actually what's happened. Because I live in the UK. I've been here for 18 years, but I'm
Hmm.
from Seattle. So
Okay.
leaving family, leaving friends,
Mm.
leaving a job I loved, coming to a place where I knew nobody except for my daughters and my husband. Like I didn't have a bank account. I didn't have, I mean, like, it
Wow.
was one of those things where it was so incredibly difficult. Looking back on it now, I was grieving the loss of those
Yeah.
relationships, the country I knew, the place I knew. I remember
Yeah.
being in an office and people were speaking with the British accent. I had no clue, Harriet, what they were
Yeah.
saying.
I
I'm
can
like, I know they're
imagine.
speaking English, but so, my kids were in school, they had left all their friends and their family. So
Mhm.
having to kind of work on with their loss and their grief as
Yes.
10 and 11-year-old girls, it is a big one that I think, yeah, people don't recognize. I had a
Yeah.
client who was really involved in rugby. She had played it and her dad had played it since she was a little kid. And
Mm.
then when she hit her 40s, she had an injury and she had to stop. And it wasn't until
Wow.
we worked together that she's like, oh my God, my identity was wrapped up in
Mm.
this sport. So even losing your health, mental, physical, a sport, there's a huge amount of grief that's wrapped in that.
You made a very good point because a lot of times, especially as women, our identities get wrapped up in the people around us, the things that we do. And then when we lose those things, we struggle to understand who we are.
Absolutely. And I'm an empty nester, right? My
Mm.
children are 28 and 30. And when they left, they're 14 months apart. My oldest daughter left. I was like, whoa, okay, at 18.
Mm.
And then a year later, my other
Wow.
one left. And I was like,
Wow.
whoa, now I just have to live with a boy. Like, I don't understand what's happening. And there was a huge amount of grief that was,
Yeah.
we raised them to do that very thing that they were doing,
Right. Yeah.
but nobody really talks about my identity as a
Mm-hmm.
mom. And then my kids
Yes.
leave.
Nobody prepares you for that. That's the one, and I actually posted that on social about a month or so ago. Like, I have a 19-year-old who's in college, and I'm like, no one prepares you for that loss that you feel as a parent when, that piece of you is no longer right there with you. So yeah,
It's
I can
true.
completely relate to that.
Yeah,
And you
that's
said
so
something
true.
else is something else that you mentioned is that I have an 8 and 10-year-old also at home, and the grieving. Like, I was because I had been a little bit more attuned with my own grieving. It was easier for me to recognize that they too were going through the same thing. So they were having a very hard time, with the move and being away from their older brother, and it was just a lot. It was a lot to take in, and not realizing. I think a lot of us go through things not realizing, when we're going through it, or even sometimes when we're just like you mentioned, it can go a long time. We end up in a place of not knowing how to deal with it, and I really want to talk about that.
Yes, absolutely. And that's part of when I had gotten my certification and accreditation, but then I went through a grief educator program because we're
Hmm.
quite grief illiterate in many ways. I think we're
Yes.
getting better, but
Yeah.
we still are quite grief illiterate. And especially when it comes to outside of the realm of losing loved ones through death. So I think educating people on there are far more losses
Mhm.
and grief than just losing a loved one through death. And yeah, absolutely. And there's different tools and obviously that you can
Yeah.
use as you process through what it is you're going through. First, identifying what it is you're going through.
Right. Right. So, in addition to the profound losses that you face through death, have you experienced any other forms of loss, such as identity or career changes yourself? And if so, how have these impacted your journey and approach to healing?
Yes. I mean, looking back on it, for sure, we talked about when I moved,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
but also I would say I went through, it was about a year after. So I had lost both of my parents. I lost my
mm-hmm.
24-year-old son-in-law 2 months after my mother. And in between that was the loss of friends, friend's children, my niece. So there were multiple losses of very close individuals.
Mm-hmm.
About a year after my son-in-law passed away, is when my husband and I, at the time we'd been married 28 years and quite unhappy, nothing horrible, just very unhappy. And
Yeah.
what happens is when you start to have these losses, it starts to highlight areas in your
Mm.
life that you're not happy. And you start to realize how short and fragile life is, right? And so I just said, right, I'm unhappy, you're unhappy. I mean, we divorced amicably. We're still
Mm-hmm.
friends. We still have a family WhatsApp group. Like we did it right, I feel.
Wow.
But
That's good.
we were, yeah, and but we were not happy. And I was like, I gotta go. I gotta go find who
Mm.
is Lisa. I married young, I had kids young. So I had a real identity. I wouldn't say a crisis. I had a coming to,
Mm-hmm.
like a meeting, it was such a healing time for me to live alone and to breathe. And, I went through therapy and I did all these other different modalities. But
Right.
for me, that was hugely important. Who is Lisa? What do I want out of this short, fragile life?
Yeah.
And not feel selfish by taking care of
Yes.
myself,
Ooh,
right?
that's a yes.
So I just learned to step into my own power. Who am I? And go after it like my life and my happiness depended on it, because quite frankly, it
It did.
does. It did,
Yeah.
and it does, exactly. And so, and then last year, 2023, I was diagnosed with breast cancer, and that was caught early on my very first mammogram. Nothing spread, but I had to have a mastectomy and I chose to have the other side removed. Now, for me, what I want to say is it's different for everybody, but for
Mm-hmm.
me, I just live flat and free. And I didn't really struggle with any kind of loss in that sense of
Mm-hmm.
losing my breast. I just was not that thing. But for
Okay.
many women, it
Yes.
truly is. But for
Yes.
me, I feel like I had lost so much and I had worked through so
Mm.
much. So I used those same tools
Yeah.
when I
So
was
it's all about
diagnosed.
good about timing, really, it sounds like.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, yes. And I think with loss, whether it's losing a loved one or your health or whatever your identity that you go through, is that there's like hundreds of little losses. It's
Mm-hmm.
not like it's necessarily one big loss.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different losses that you have to process through almost daily,
Yeah.
weekly, monthly, yearly.
Yeah. So it's important to figure out how to do that. Um, that's what's going to be important. So what I hear from you is that you discovered the importance of legitimizing all forms of grief, regardless of where it was coming from. Can you talk about why that is important and why it's critical, really, for healing?
It is critical for healing. For one, being kind of self aware, but also permission. I mean, I think we
Mm-hmm.
don't give ourselves permission to grieve. And what I learned during that process, especially compound grief, is like compound one loss after another, after
Mm-hmm.
another, after another. And you lift your head up, you get hit again. So,
Mm.
what I realized and recognized was I can't grieve all these losses at once. So,
Mm.
I really, if my dad came to mind, I would process that and I would spend time grieving my dad or remembering my dad or honoring my dad. Or if my mom came,
Right.
my son-in-law, it was like I had to take it one loss at that very moment. I took it as a sign. If that was, I
Mm-hmm.
woke up and I was thinking of my niece, then I would spend time grieving her. But the reality of grieving, the way that you grieve is so personal. And,
Yes.
some days, honestly, I was like, nope. I just put my hoodie over my head and I watched Netflix and
Mm,
ate popcorn and chocolate. Like,
yes.
do you know what I mean? I didn't,
Yes.
but then sometimes I would be like, okay, I'm going to sit in this and I'm going to work
Mm,
through this. I'm going to get my therapist on I'm going to go to her office or whatever tools I needed at that very moment. I started to learn that it was okay, whatever it was I needed. If I needed people or if I
yeah.
needed people to stay away, whatever it
Mm,
was, I just had to embrace it. And I would say for everybody, it's okay for whatever it is that you feel you need.
I'm glad you highlighted that, because I feel like sometimes we get to this space where we feel obligated to let other people in, or to, oh, she's called me so many times, or they've tried to check on me. And we feel this obligation to make other people feel better or feel good when we're just trying to make it through the day in some cases.
That's it. So we're trying to manage our own grief and pain
Hmm.
while managing other people's emotions.
Yeah.
And that is exhausting. And
Yes.
it is exhausting and impossible. And our loved ones don't want us to hurt. They don't
Yeah.
want us to be in pain, but the reality is we are. And nothing they
Yeah.
can say or do can fix that. But that's the other part of kind of the educating, the message that I try to tell others who are supporting loved ones who are grieving any type of loss. Like these
Yeah.
are the things, the kind of the do's and don'ts, the things that you could
Mhm.
do, message them and let them know you're there, but say, you do not need to respond. I just
Yeah.
want you to know that I'm here and I love you and I'm
Mm.
sending you all sorts of energy, whatever it is you can say to them, but always start it out with, you do not need to respond.
I like that. I think that could help so many people, um, on both sides, right? Because you got the people who I have previously, I'm trying to do better, but I've previously kind of stayed away because I'm like, I don't want to bother them. I don't know the right thing to say. But then on the flip side, it's like it helps the people who, are in that situation and they're like, okay, they know I may not respond, so that takes a lot of the pressure off. So I love that you shared that.
Yeah, it takes a lot of the pressure off. And I think,
Yeah.
well, speaking to anybody who is grieving any type of loss, the people
Mhm.
who stay away, which is, of course, because we don't want to say anything stupid. Let's be honest.
Right.
We want to say the right thing and we don't want to
That's
be
me.
stupid. Yeah. And
Yeah.
be like, I don't want to cause them any more pain.
Exactly.
Right. But what I found for those, and for myself included, is that feels worse. That
Hmm.
feels like someone doesn't care. Of course, it
Yeah.
depends on your relationship with them, but that's why I say, I'm over here. You don't have to respond, but I just want you to know I'm here and I love you. And, whatever it is you say to them.
And that makes all the difference in the world. I mean, even when I've been on the side where someone reaches out and says, "Hey, I want you to know I'm thinking of," like that, it does something. So I definitely understand when you say it feels worse when you don't at least even reach out. Um, so yeah, I can get that.
Yeah.
Now, after a loss, whether it's a significant loss or like grief, or I'm sorry, like a death, or if it's, something, I won't say it's less significant. I'll just say not death. I'll say that. Um, a lot of times we will experience like a quiet period, and you mentioned your own, a period of introspection. How do you, or how can you share how people will navigate this phase? And well, as they're navigating this phase, I would say, what opportunities for growth does that present, that quiet time?
Yeah, do you know, I don't know about you, but I think it's a high statistic that when we are going through traumatic events, we're going
Mhm.
through a very dark time, that is when growth can really happen. I feel like that's when at some point it shows who you are at the core, your resilience, the
Mhm.
power, the strength that you have. And it's hard. So some people will just get really busy, right? They'll
Mhm.
just go into work and they'll work 12, 14-hour days, or they're going to keep
Yeah.
themselves busy so that they don't have to feel and experience. And
Mhm.
then there's others who will have that quiet time and that space. I did not get counseling with a bereavement counselor until after my mom died. So it was 14 months. So between my dad and my mom, I didn't get counseling until then. I wasn't ready.
Mm.
I wasn't ready to do that, but I
Yeah.
was ready to just breathe and sit. But
Mhm.
I knew that I couldn't do it alone. So I knew that when the time was right, I knew what I needed to do. And for others, it's different. Other
Yeah.
modalities, they have other things that they do. I had a good support system, but in like my best friend and some other friends. But on the same token, I just wasn't ready to like
Mhm.
face that yet.
Yeah.
So the quiet times were absolutely necessary and absolutely painful. And we humans we always want to go towards pleasure, not pain, right? We
Mhm.
want to do the thing that gives us pleasure, not pain. I mean, who wants to do that?
Yeah, yeah. We want to jump to the good part. Like we want to fast forward through that the storm, the wilderness, anything that's uncomfortable. We don't want to sit in it
A
because
hundred
no one
percent.
likes to be uncomfortable.
100%. You know what? When I sat in my therapist's office, I was like, and this is now after my son-in-law died, and she was like, "Oh my God, Lisa!" Like I'm like, "Oh, I know. Like I can't even comprehend it." And I said, "I just want to fast forward 2 years. I don't know what 2 years was going to look like, but like
Yeah.
so, I wanted to fast forward, like you said, and I
Yeah.
literally said those words, but I knew I could not do
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
sadly."
Yeah. Hey, I understand. I can completely relate. So, Lisa, what are some challenges that people might face during this quiet period? And how can they address these challenges constructively?
Yeah. So the challenge is, I mean, grief is very lonely, but I always
Mm-hmm.
say grief is very lonely, but you don't have to do it alone. So, one of the things that I think people potentially could be challenged with is the words that are being said, their own expectations of how they're supposed to do this thing called grief. And
Mm-hmm.
those expectations are usually placed upon us, either society or we do it,
Yeah.
place it on ourselves, and 9 times out of 10 is incorrect.
Yeah.
And so therefore these are going to be challenges that they're going to face, or people are saying things, or
Mm-hmm.
they're doing things. Anger and grief and guilt and grief are like a married couple.
Yes.
So a lot of us, I didn't feel guilty. I was raging. I was angry,
Yes.
and I had to suppress it so that I wouldn't lash out at, the person at the grocery store, or road rage,
Mm-hmm.
or family or friends.
Yeah.
But what that ended up doing is I suppressed so much of that anger because I didn't have that outlet.
Yeah.
So if you can find an outlet, whether that is therapy or coaching or gong sound healing or praying or meditation or like whatever it is to release that. I think even in the States, I don't know, I heard they have these like rage rooms where you can take an axe or like a big sledgehammer and break
Yes.
stuff up. I was like,
Yes. They
that's
actually
an
also
amazing
have
idea.
they also have axe throwing. A friend of mine actually just told me the other day that we need to go and do it just for the fun of it. I'm like, I can only imagine because when you're angry and you're raging, you want to break something. So
Absolutely.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And what I ended up doing, this was after my dad passed away and before my mom and all the other losses. My youngest daughter and I, we did kickboxing. So we were
Hmm.
doing these kickboxing classes. And one time I said to her, I was sparring her with these, and made a comment about something that had happened after my dad died.
Hmm.
And she kicked. I felt my teeth jiggle. Like she
Oh
kicked
my.
so hard. I was like, boom. I'm like, oh my God. I was like, woo. But that was a really important release. I'm glad I had the pads there, but it was a really important release to be
Hmm.
able to do that. And I just remember, pounding on these, and it just, so exercise and getting out
Yes.
in nature and breathing in that fresh air, the mindfulness, that was also so
Yes.
important. So there will be challenges that people will not understand until
Hmm.
they're in it. Um, but yeah, these are some of the things that I had to deal with.
Yeah. Um, when you were talking about the kickboxing, I can recall like boxing was one. We have a punching bag. And I was going through just a tough time with work, and I can remember sometimes visualizing a face on there, or
Yep.
maybe not. Um, but it was a good release. So I wrote down the
Yes.
exercise, mindfulness, praying, meditation, therapy. Those are awesome things. I like those. And so hopefully as people are listening that can completely relate, because I'm sure that many people can to what we're discussing today, that they'll take some of these into consideration
Yeah,
as they're trying
absolutely.
to, yeah. And so what is some practical advice that you would give someone who is coping with a significant loss, be it death of a loved one, a career change, a move, or that feeling of losing themselves or a fading dream?
Mm. Well, the one thing that I would say is that I know that we use this term a lot, and sometimes it's overused, but I think there's such power in being kind to yourself.
Mm,
Really having that self-care and self-love. I always think, what would I say to my best friend? Or what would I say to my friend who is going through something? Put that
yeah.
on you as well. Um, that is really important. It is exhausting. And I remember with my therapist, I felt like, okay, I knew enough about trauma. I knew enough about grief. I knew enough that I didn't want it sitting in my body. So I wanted to work on it all the time. And she said,
Mm-hmm.
Lisa, sometimes it's okay to not grieve.
Mm.
Like sometimes it's okay to swerve. And I think
Ooh,
that is really important because you don't have to sit in it all the time. There were times when things would start to come up, and I'm like, nope, not right now. I don't have the bandwidth to deal with
yeah.
it. And so it's okay to go, not today, not right now,
Mm, yeah.
and then go do something else, and then sometimes it's impossible to go, not right now,
Yeah.
it just
Yeah.
comes. And then that's when you have to just let it. And
Mm-hmm.
your support system is going to be huge. I tell people, another piece of advice I say, that we have some toxic relationships, some what I call energy draining vampires, those friendships that your energy is drained already so much when you are grieving any type of loss, that the last thing you need is someone to come along and drain the very last thing, a piece of
So
energy you
true.
have.
Yeah.
So I always say I either shelved them, put them on the shelf until I was ready, or kicked them off the shelf and they're gone completely. And that was really important. So I surrounded myself with those who were healthy and uplifting and energy giving and not
Yes.
energy draining, especially during that time. I knew
Yeah.
it wasn't going to need, I wouldn't need it forever, but sometimes it's okay to say, you know what? This has to be about me right now.
Yeah. I like that. That's good. And to shelve them or to kick them off the shelf, like that's that is good. I like that. Because sometimes we do have these moments where we're just allowing people to stay, even though they aren't serving us, they aren't serving they're taking more from us, like you said, draining, than they are giving. And it is just not conducive to our growth or our healing for sure.
No, you're right. Absolutely.
Well, Lisa, I just want to say thank you so much for everything that you shared with us today. I have truly enjoyed diving into this conversation with you.
Thank you
Um,
so much.
Thank you. We're going to take a pause for a brief commercial break. And then when we return, we're going to wrap up our discussion with Lisa's final thoughts and a special takeaway for all of our listeners. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Want a chance to win exclusive You Are Not Your Trauma merch? Here's how. Leave a rating and a review on your favorite podcast platform and share your thoughts with us. It helps us reach more listeners who may also be seeking healing and growth. Once you left your feedback, visit feedback.youarenotyourtrauma.com to let us know you've entered by entering your info and the word feedback in the message section. You could be a lucky winner. Now stay tuned for today's inspiring episode, and thank you for being a part of the You Are Not Your Trauma community.
Okay, we are back. Now, Lisa, again, I am so grateful that you were willing to come and share your wisdom and heart with us today. Your stories, your experiences, they really remind us that while loss is universal, so is our capacity for resilience and transformation. Now, do you have any final thoughts for our listeners today?
One of the things that first of all, thank you so much. It's just been a great conversation. One of the things that I would say to individuals, we tend to compare our grief, and that can be really devastating. So, what I would say is your grief is the worst grief because it's yours. So David
Mm.
Kessler, who is a grief expert, he's who I had my training with, said your grief is the worst because it's yours. You're carrying it. And so let's not compare our grief to others or minimize our pain because it's not as bad as somebody else's.
Yes, I like that. Thank you for sharing that. Um, I feel like a lot of times that is so true. What we're going through is heightened because it's our experience. But I feel like that shift that you mentioned of just allowing ourselves to own that ours is the worst, and don't say, well, this happened to this person over here, so mine isn't that bad. We have a tendency to do that, but we should stop. So thank you. Thank you so much. Now, I want to invite all of our listeners to join the conversation. Share your stories of navigating the aftermath of loss, how you found new meaning, or a moment of unexpected growth. You can use the hashtag after the storm and be sure to tag You Are Not Your Trauma podcast on Facebook, IG, or TikTok. I look forward to checking out your inspiring stories. Now, as we wrap up today's episode, I want everyone to remember that in the quiet aftermath of loss, our souls whisper truths of resilience, guiding us toward light and rebirth. So let's remember to carry this message forward. Now, to everyone who's listening, again, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of You Are Not Your Trauma podcast. Your presence is a vital part of this collective journey. Now, if you found today's episode helpful, please don't forget to share it with someone who can benefit from the information that's being shared. Also, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review the show. You can check out the website, www.youarenotyourtrauma.com, to leave feedback, request to be a guest on the show, subscribe to the show, get information on our show guests, or to get information about advertising on You Are Not Your Trauma podcast. You can connect with You Are Not Your Trauma podcast on Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram at You Are Not Your Trauma podcast. And if you have a story to share, please email me at contact@harrietmharris.com. And also, don't forget to download the You Are Not Your Trauma app for more resources and community support. It is a fantastic tool to accompany you on your healing journey, and it's available in the Google Play Store and the Apple App Store. Now, if you need additional resources to aid you in your journey of healing and self-discovery, I encourage you to download the You Are Not Your Trauma Resource Guide, and that's available through the app or by visiting resourceguide.youarenotyourtrauma.com. Now, until next time, keep embracing your journey, knowing that you are not your trauma.